Hi, everybody. I'm here today to talk to you about frogs and toads of Williamsburg. I want to try to give you some basics to help you identify the different frogs and toads, and then I'm going to teach you about 14 different ones that are fairly common in the area. So let's begin. And we're going to start by talking about three general groups that most of these frogs and toads fit into: the true frogs, the tree frogs, and the true toads. The true frogs are probably what you're most familiar with. These are smooth and moist skinned. They have large, powerful legs so they can hop. Their feet are extensively webbed so that it allows them to swim. And many of them are aquatic or at least live close to a body of water. Next group are the tree frogs, and of course, as the name implies, they live in trees. They have the typical frog shape. They have long hind legs and they have smooth and moist skin. But what really sets them apart are the disc-shaped adhesive pads that are on their fingers and toes that allow them to climb things. And these are the frogs that you'll typically see around your house in the evening on your back porch. They might be around a light and hunting insects. And last are the true toads. And the true toads have dry skin, they have warts, they have crests behind their eyes, and they have parotoid glands which allow them to produce a toxin that will help them defend themselves. All right, so here's some images to help you guys see exactly what we're talking about. First of all, here's the true frog foot here, and you'll notice that there's webbing in between the toes. The next is the tree frog, and you'll notice the little discs out at the end of each toe, which allows it to climb. Uh, Also on this page is a picture of bullfrogs and a chorus frog and a leopard frog. And you see here is a really teeny tiny chorus frog, which is a type of tree frog. And then much larger is the northern leopard frog. And then the really big one is the bullfrog. All right, this diagram is important because it shows us some things that we're going to use as diagnostic features. On the true frogs, we're going to use these ridges that run from the eyes down towards the pelvis region, which are called dorsolateral ridges. We're also going to use the tympanum, which is the eardrum, which you see this circle right behind the eyes. On the toads, two important diagnostic features, actually three diagnostic features, are the cranial ridges, which run behind the eye, the parotoid gland, which are these large glands that secrete toxin, and then, of course, the warty skin. When we start looking at the frogs, the toads in detail, we have two toads that we're going to be concerned with, the Fowler's toad and the American toad. And these cranial crest and parotoid glands are going to be key in identifying or the different species. So you can see in the Fowler's toad, the parotoid gland sits right up against the cranial crest, and in the American toad, they're barely touching, if at all. One last thing I want to talk about is sizes. Well, actually, I'll talk about sizes and colors, but we'll first do sizes. Sizes, I'm not going to give you exact sizes. I'm just going to be very general. So first, we'll talk about small, which the frogs that tend to be smaller are 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches in size, typically about the size of a quarter. Medium size is 1.25 to 2.5 inches in size, and this is about the size of one of those Hershey's bars that you get at Halloween in your Halloween basket. Large would be 2 to 4 inches in size, and that would probably fit in the palm of your hand. And extra large would be something that would fill your hand, 4 inches to 8 inches. Now, I don't have a slide on color, but I'm just going to tell you right now, don't get really attached to any one color because frogs tend to have a range of colors. And so I'll mention it sometimes and sometimes I'll forget. That's because really color is not what we're going to be using to identify these species. All right, so on we go. And we're going to start out with tree frogs. In fact, this is what we're going to cover this first video. are just the tree frogs because we have a lot of them. And the first one is a spring peeper. Spring peeper is a small frog. It could be brown or it could be bronze in color, even sometimes being orangish and yellow in color. So again, color isn't something that's going to really help you, but what you're going to look for is this X that's on the back of the spring peeper. Now, being a tree frog, it's going to have large toe pads, and the sound that you're going to hear is well, like its voice. It's a peep. It's going to make a peep, peep. So you're going to hear a single frog peeping, and then you're going to hear a chorus of frogs. The next tree frog is the gray tree frog, which actually isn't just a species, it's several species. And they all look the same, and about the only way you can tell them apart is by sound, but we're not going to really go there. Now, you're probably looking at this and saying, how can they look the same? I've got a green one and a gray one. Well, each of the species of gray tree frogs can have green morphs or gray morphs, even to the point of being white. So what in the world are you going to use to identify this? Well, first of all, we'll go by size. It's a medium-sized frog. You'll be able to tell it's a tree frog because of the big toe pads it has. But some of the other things you're going to look for is the warty skin, because usually tree frogs are smooth, but this one tends to be warty. And you're also going to notice the bars here on the back of its legs. And then last is right underneath the eye is a light colored spot that kind of stands out from all of the others. Now, when you listen to this particular tree frog call, it's going to have a trill. The trill is going to me, it's going to sound, oh, this is going to age me, but if you've ever watched the old video or old cartoon, The Jetsons, it sounds like they're old space cars it's traveling around. Also, it sort of sounds like old-fashioned ray guns in the old sci-fi movies. Our next tree frog is the green tree frogs, obviously named because it's green, but don't get married to green because sometimes it can be a yellowish color. This is also a medium-sized tree frog, probably our largest tree frog. Uh, and it has this really cool racing stripe that runs from its jaw down along its side, and then you can see it comes up underneath of its leg and runs all the way down to its toes. It's a pretty distinctive mark on this particular frog. So how are you going to tell this frog besides the racing stripe? How are you going to tell its call? Well, sometimes its call is described as sounding like a cowbell, but I don't think it sounds like a cowbell. To me, it sounds, well, some people think it sounds like a duck, and I can see where it does sound sort of like a duck. I also think it sounds like a pogo stick. Our next tree frog is a squirrel tree frog, which you probably are looking at going, oh my goodness, it looks like the green tree frog. Well, it does, but it's a lot smaller. This is a small frog. It is green, but don't get married to green again because of all the tree frogs, this one is like a chameleon. It could change its colors at will. But most of the time it tends to have this muddy looking green. You'll also notice that it has some little black spots on it, which they may or may not have sometimes. And it has a stripe just like the green tree frog, but it's not as distinct. It's kind of yellowish. It's running from here on its mouth down its side, but then sometimes it's kind of disappears. So it's not really, really distinct. This is probably the frog you see the most around your houses during the summertime around your porch lights. Again, a very small frog, and it's out there and it's eating as many insects as it possibly can. So what does this particular frog sound like? I think that this one sounds, even though they call it a squirrel tree frog, and some people describe it as having a squirrel-like sound, I think it sounds like a duck. Okay, our next tree frog is a northern cricket frog. Now, this frog can be gray, it can be brown, black, green, yellow. I've seen all different versions of this frog. And so again, color doesn't help you much, but you might say, well, then how am I going to tell this frog? Well, it has a really good diagnostic feature. If you look at its head and between its eyes, there's this triangle, and it's always there, and it's pointing back towards the tail of this frog. So it's a small frog, is easy to tell with that triangle. Even though I've seen it bright green before, it always has that triangle there. Now, when this one calls, some people think it sounds like a cricket. Some people think it sounds like someone's taking two stones and hitting them together and making this clicking sound. If you happen to be somebody who is adept at using tools and you've used a socket wrench before, it sounds like the ratchet sound on a socket wrench. Okay, our last tree frog is Brimley's chorus frog. And again, another small frog. And it can be brown, it can be bronze. So what are you going to look for with this? Well, the diagnostic feature here is the stripe that runs from its snout all the way down to the groin. This stripe you see there. No other frog has that you're going to learn. So what does the sound of this one sound like? So it makes a trill, a very raspy sounding trill. I think it sounds like two things. One thing it sounds like is if you've ever played with a comb before and run your thumb over the tines of a comb, if you've ever played with a really hard comb, it makes a fairly musical kind of raspy sound, kind of a trill. Another thing that this frog sounds like is if you've ever seen those wooden frog instruments that have the ridges down the back of the spine, and you take a stick and you run it down those, you just kind of rub it along, and it makes this, again, a trill sound that they might use in a percussive, as a percussive instrument. So here's Brimley's coarse frog. And with that, so ends the first part of this two-part series. Make sure that you come back and watch part two, but take yourself a break, go to the restroom, get a bite to eat, and come back for more exciting frogs and toads.